As a new year approaches, thoughts turn to new opportunities and what 2022 could bring for the UAE and the wider GCC. Well, one exciting prospect which could lead to a very happy new year are potential talks about a free trade agreement between the UK and the GCC, particularly when you consider that in 2019, bilateral trade between this region and the UK stood at £45 billion. That's $62 billion. Well, to dive into this, I'm delighted once again to be joined by Simon Penney, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for the Middle East and Her Majesty's Consul General Dubai. Simon, welcome again to AV Talks.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so exciting. Let's look at resolutions for the new year. Why do you want to strike a UK GCC free trade agreement?
Well, as you quite rightly said in your opening remarks, trade already stands at a very healthy £45 billion, and the UK and the countries of the Gulf have enjoyed a very long and historical trading relationship, but we want to take that to the next level. I mean, the global landscape has changed considerably. The competitive landscape has changed considerably, and obviously we're looking at ways in which we can ensure that the UK remains a viable long-term partner, and we see a free trade agreement very much as a mechanism through which we can do that. So where are we in that process? Well, we're currently in what we call a consultation phase, which is a very uniquely UK part of the process, where we enter a period of engagement with UK stakeholders, UK businesses, anybody who has an interest in our trading relationship with the Gulf. So that consultation phase concludes on the 14th of January, by which time we will collate all of that input, all of the wishes, all of the asks of stakeholders, and bring that together, which will help us inform what we call our negotiating mandate. And we hope, all things being equal, that we should be able to start formal negotiations with the GCC in the first half of next year, which is very exciting for all of us.
Talk to me a bit further about the timelines, because I was going to ask, when do the actual negotiations begin? You've answered that. Typically, how long do these negotiations take? When could we see a deal signed? Or is this like a piece of string? It could go really, really fast, or depends on the details and could take longer period of time?
Look, it's a really good question, and it's one which can't be answered in one simple word, unfortunately, because you use the analogy piece of string. I mean, both parties are going into this with a very strong desire to do an agreement, an ambitious agreement, I should say, because we want this to be comprehensive. We want it to be ambitious, that's going to set both sides up for the decades ahead. So the ambition levels are high. We both have a very strong desire actually to do an agreement quickly. So we're starting from a very similar point. I mean, I should say that, you know, the history is varied in terms of success around the speed with which trade agreements can be done. We as the UK are moving very quickly since we left the European Union. We've already agreed in principle agreements with New Zealand, with Australia. We're starting with the US, the TPP, which is a 9 trillion trading bloc spanning east to west. So our ambitions are really high, and the pace with which our Prime Minister wishes us to move is equally high.
I mean, there's obviously a long friendship, particularly between the UAE and the UK, and we saw deals, investment deals struck earlier in the year. How much does that give you a foundation moving forward? And what will the benefits of a free trade agreement bring to companies in the region and to the UAE in particular, but region-wide? What's the benefit for this part of the world to sign this deal with the UK?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I'm a representative of the UK, so I tend to look at things primarily through the benefits to the UK, but equally any agreement that involves two parties, both sides have to feel that they're benefiting. So I'm very, very clear that this is an agreement that's going to benefit the Gulf, and it's going to benefit the UK. I mentioned earlier on about market share. You know, if we follow current trajectories of market share, the UK, along with many traditional, what would you call sort of Western exporting nations to the Gulf, we've all seen our market share slowly eroded over the last 2 decades, as we've seen competition rise significantly from the East, particularly China, but more broadly, the Indo-Pacific. So we see the free trade agreement as a very important mechanism not only for protecting market share, but for growing market share. And I think people talk a lot about free trade agreements as being a major enabler to reduce tariffs. Well, actually, tariffs are quite low in the Gulf already, which actually is the reason why we've got such high bilateral trade numbers today. So whilst we will be looking at tariffs, it's actually a lot of what we call the non-tariff barriers, the things that frustrate business over and above tariffs themselves. And when I engage with businesses and I engage with business groups, you very rarely hear anyone talk about tariffs as being an inhibitor to doing business in the Gulf. It tends to be other areas, regulatory areas, areas around governance and law. And the movement that the UAE in particular is making in that area already is incredibly progressive. And we're really confident that that free trade agreement will build upon the work the UAE is doing, the UK is doing, and ensure that trade between our two nations in the GCC and the UK continues to grow.
We heard from the Minister for Foreign Trade for the UAE recently, who talked about that the UAE in particular, what his focus was for the UAE, that they were looking out to become very much an international trading partner now. They're looking at CEPAs, which are obviously slightly separate for free trade agreements. But there was very much a global outlook now. What appetite are you getting from the GCC? What's the sentiment around their view of a UK trade deal, and also what's the early sentiment you're picking up of the UK towards the Gulf region?
Well, I have to say, I mean, all 6 member states of the GCC have been very front-footed with the UK, particularly since we left the European Union. All member states have been united in their desire to strike a free trade agreement with the UK. So the ambition level is really high amongst Gulf countries, and that ambition level is matched by the UK. A little statistic, which, and I won't try and bombard you with stats, but
I love numbers. I love numbers.
Well, here we go. So outside of the European Union, so the Gulf is the UK's 3rd largest export market globally. So our largest is the US, the second is China, and then the Gulf. So already we're starting from a position of real strength on both the Gulf side and the UK side. So the ambition's high, the drive is there. We've hopefully started that firing gun. So yeah, we're confident that the free trade agreement will turbo boost, as our Prime Minister calls it, trade with the region.
So we had some interesting announcements yesterday from the UAE, which is they're going to obviously move the working week from Monday to Friday. And when they looked at that, they talked about aligning closer with international markets and partners, such as the UK. Can I ask your thoughts on that move? I mean, what are the benefits perhaps that you see from that?
Well, I mean, looking at it from a purely commercial point of view, I mean, it's incredibly positive. I mean, it's going to ensure that the UAE working week is aligned with the majority, I guess, of the sort of the global working week. And I think particularly, across all sectors, but financial services, which is an industry I'd come from nowhere, I think will be a huge beneficiary, particularly when you look at trading hours and trading weeks. And I think it will allow the UAE to really reinforce itself as a financial global hub that is aligned with the East and the West, sitting in the middle with a completely aligned working week. I think it's going to be really, really positive for businesses, trade and investment in all directions.
If I may ask a last question, these free trade agreements often encompass so much in so many sectors. Who do you think the key beneficiaries are going to be? Where do you think the biggest opportunities are for the Gulf and the UK in terms of sectors that would benefit?
It's going to be broad-based. I mentioned it's going to be comprehensive and it's going to be ambitious. So we're going to be pushing boundaries in both directions. And, I think that the sectors which will probably benefit most will be those in the digital economy, which is an emerging economy, of course. And the UAE and the broader Gulf has ambitions, obviously, to be regional and global leaders in that. I mean, the services sector, which is a significant part of the UK economy. So that's financial services, legal services, anything that's sort of regulated, that is constrained by regulation. The food industry, of course, is another one which is highly regulated, but the more we can align GCC regulations with UK regulations, it will make it so much easier for businesses to move in both directions.
Brilliant. Last thought, what do you think is the most exciting thing to come out of this then in 2022? If we're looking at a happy new year, what are you really looking forward to as part of these negotiations?
Well, really, it's firing the starting gun on the FTA. I mean, it's been a long time in the making. I mean, the UK obviously has been part of the EU in the past, and the EU have tried to progress an FTA. That has never actually come to fruition. So I'm really, really excited that as a sort of independent UK, we've got that ability now to set out and strike our own free trade agreement with what is our third largest trading partner globally.
That feels like a mic drop moment. Simon Penney, thank you again for joining us on AB Talks. It's a little early, but I will wish you a happy new year as well.
The same to you. Thank you, Scott.